Okay, let's see. For people joining us on the live stream, this is an internal architecture meeting about our repository framework, otherwise known as our resource system. And let's get started here. So the first thing we're talking about is our formula repository. And what is this? Is this an actual test deployment here?
Yeah.
Okay, nice. All right, so let's take a look. Is there real stuff in here?
Everything should be working. There are a few minor issues that I'll address as you find them. Right, so some of them are empty, and we need to trim the empty ones.
Physics has content.
Physics has a lot, engineering has a lot.
Okay, uncategorized is a little odd. Magnetic frequency shift. Wow, why is there all this junk at the top here?
Right, so we have two dimensions of sorting. One is the category and one is the physical quantities of the variables in the formula.
Okay, well, first of all, let's take a look at the actual formula. So first point is all these formulas so far are algebraic type formulas.
They're algebraic, yes.
Is Michael here?
Yeah, that's correct.
One thing, so for these with multiple formulas or multiple equations, we're going to lay them out vertically instead of horizontally. It's just not, this one's not updated yet.
Are you sure that's the right thing to do? I guess
think
it is.
so.
Yeah,
Aligned on the equal sign is the way we're doing it right now.
I would think so.
Okay, all right. Are we not linking these physical quantities and things to something interesting? For example, to the Wolfram alpha output about that physical quantity, I would think. And also G factor surely has a space in the name G factor.
We could link to alpha.
Also, with these physical quantities, why aren't we just writing out their actual names rather than giving the smooshed standard form version? Actually, I have multiple suggestions here.
We found a couple of inconsistencies on those two. I think it's definitely something we need to hash out still, exactly what we want.
But I mean, another question is, should this allow copy paste to desktop? For example, should this, oh, look at
it.
That.
Is.
Oh,
it does.
Golly gosh. Wow.
I think, yes, it should support that.
Very good. All right, let's see what it does. Raw.
Right. So this is sort of like the extended version of quantity variable that we could trim out all those options, but they're really useful. So
well, I don't understand what all of that is. I mean, in other words, why? Okay. So first question is, why isn't this not a formula data thing?
Well, the first example.
No, I think that you should get what you see, not something that evaluates to it.
Right.
Okay.
So if you evaluate that, it'll be just like what you see. Right. We could trim out all those options that are showing up red because
Yeah, we should.
Jason can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's something that isn't really documented for users at all, right?
No.
Well, that would be why it turned red.
Right.
Should we be documenting it?
No.
No.
What is it?
It's used internally by formula data to answer all the various little questions like what is the canonical unit, that sort of thing.
And like the table that's on the shingle that we were talking about the physical quantity column of, that's generated from this metadata.
Mm-hmm.
But why isn't, I don't understand, why isn't angular frequency a definite type of quantity that then goes in and understands what features it has? I mean, why isn't angular frequency just a key that gives you all this other stuff?
Well, some of it is formula specific. Default value, for instance.
Okay, well then where are we going to get that from if we drop it from here?
Within the repository, we'll still store it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
in the guts.
But what's it doing in this formula? I mean, isn't it useful in this formula? Michael, help me out.
No. I think like you could have, let's see, take physical quantity mass. And so mass is a very general one, but it might be initial mass, final mass, neutron mass. You know, there are many instances. It might be information you want to have available for various purposes or default values. So we put them somewhere, and there's nothing wrong with putting them as further options into existing symbol. But this does not mean that quantity variable a math is the canonical generic thing.
Well, I mean, it's not pleasant to have string things that look like options when they're not options. I mean, if we're really going to have this.
No, but we will not have it. It's just that.
Okay, but if we're going to pack it in there for internal purposes, why don't we officially give quantity variable a third argument that's an association where it can pack all this information in? Rather than having
but then the majority of function wouldn't know what to do with it.
Well, that's fine, but I'm just saying, whatever is done with it, if you ever see it, having it generate this giant red mess is clearly not desirable.
Right. If you do that, then users can do whatever they want with it.
Right. I mean, unless you think it is merely an internal thing that should be stripped on output, basically.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, fine. Fine. Then I have no opinion. Okay, let's take a look here. So these things like angular frequency, I don't understand how. Oh, I see. So this should surely be consistent. I mean, it says it's angular frequency. It should surely have a common name that's similarly capitalized, right? Does that make sense? I mean, it's a little goofy looking because
in that right column, we're listing the Wolfram Language name for the physical quantity. Maybe we just need to update the header of that table.
Mm-hmm. Well, but what is the purpose of this? I mean, in other words,
a lot of times description is not so boring and directly mapped to this physical quantity. Like in that third one, it's not identical.
The gyromagnetic ratio shows nicely the thing. It is, in general, a magnetic frequency shift from the type, but in this concrete formula, it's the gyromagnetic ratio.
Yeah, I get it.
So generically, often they will be very similar, but sometimes they will be substantially deviating from each other, the names.
Okay. Well, I'm saying I think these should be common names. Do we have a common name thing here? We do, don't we? There must be a common name. Like long name.
Have we exposed to common names?
No, we have not exposed the common names.
So. We don't have exposed to common names for.
So if that's something we don't have common names for these?
No, I think kind of like you had actually a while ago, a couple of weeks ago, suggested, and I spoke with Eric, he's starting working on it, making physical quantities in addition to basically string arguments within quantity variable, actually entities. And once we have entities, then we can associate things like common name and other things to them.
Fine.
Like what we did for physical constants.
Right. Okay. But then these things here should surely have, the same kind of copy mechanism that has, I would think. Mm-hmm. At least the physical quantity part of it should.
Right.
Yes, I agree.
And arguably the symbol should as well. The symbol could
definitely
be the physical quantity with all its tentacles.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Now, what does this mean, calculate frequencies? Where did that come from? I thought it was a single frequency, the Larmor frequency. What is this doing here? And why are these italic? And why are there no spaces between the G factor and the G word?
It looks like we've lost our hyphens is what the problem is there with the G factor.
What's a hyphen doing? What do you mean hyphen? You mean colons or?
No, there was a hyphen between G and factor, but somehow.
Oh, well, okay, fine. That's a detailed issue with the specifically G factor, but I'm asking, there should be a space.
Yes,
around G.
Right. We can, we'll add that space. Okay. There's another issue you see in the hint on the third for.
I don't. Why can't I edit this? I mean, if I just want to use Tesla again, why can't I just edit the word?
Well, so it's a hint and not a default, because if every field has a default, the form evaluates immediately.
Well, I didn't understand. What do you mean it evaluates immediately?
If you create if you deploy a form function or a form page, well, we can talk about that bug in a second. But if you deploy a form page where every field has a default, and then you open it, it will evaluate.
That seems like a bug.
I mean, I could see either way being reasonable, but it should be something that you can configure. I don't think it is. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay. I could talk to Carlo to see if you can turn that off.
Fine. Okay. Now we seem to have lost the times 10 to the 10 or 10 to the minus.
Well, there's a bug that I've reported for cloud. Pretty much all the HTML exporting fails on scientific notation.
Okay. Why is there an HTML export at all? Is this, did you write it with a superscript and things?
I think the default is an actual number, not a string, I believe. Isn't that right, Jason?
Yes.
Well, that's going to goof up completely. We don't want that. We don't even want it because, you know, it's going to give some weird E notation from HTML, and we definitely don't want that. Am I making sense?
Right. Well, I mean, one of the challenges here is for a number of things, we've had to basically write a custom HTML exporter.
Why? Why?
So if like that table above where we have these symbol names, some of them are like omega star over omega tilde.
Okay, but have you talked to the people who deal with the HTML export? Because that shouldn't require, I mean, there should be a way of just taking a grid and outputting it in that form.
Right, there's not, and I didn't want to wait for their timeline. So,
well, what is that timeline? Who did you talk to about actually getting that done?
I don't know. There's a ticket open that I think is, I'm not sure if it's assigned. I'm not sure if it's assigned. I can try to find it.
Who's PMing this?
The scientific notation thing is assigned to Carlo.
I don't know whether it's really for him, but I mean this thing is something in Andre's area, knowing how to do that export. We have a lot to cover in this meeting, so let's just keep going a bit. Okay, so I don't understand where calculate frequencies comes from.
Jason's put together, form definitions for.
Well, we have a few different frequencies in this particular formula. I mean, they're frequency and angular frequency.
The fact that it's not the fact that it's not working on quantities is a known issue. I'm going to address that. It's just not deployed here right now. Right now, it's expecting numbers, and I'm going to fix it so that it'll properly take quantities.
Okay, so none of this is going to work.
If you just put in numbers in all four fields, it'll work.
Okay. I mean, I can't even imagine what 1 kilogram. That's very big, and 1 coulomb. Okay, let's see what happens. Why is it taking it forever to compute something which is basically trivial?
Right. So this is the other place where we had to start making our own HTML exporter, and you can see it's pretty ugly.
It's really ridiculously bad. Yeah. This is silly.
We're working on it. This might be an old one. Let me see if I can find one there.
Okay, but this is wrong in so many different ways. Well, that's disappointing. All right. Okay, so let's take a look down here. Okay.
Examples are currently done semi-programmatically, and we are going to have a process to go through and update those by hand before launch.
Okay. All right. What is our process here? I mean, given this page, how do we get to Wolfram Alpha from this page, for example?
That was one of the things we discussed yesterday with some people, and we wanted to discuss more with you.
Right. Okay.
Like there are various possibilities you might want to go from here. You might want to go to the cloud using formula data. You might want to use resource data. You might want to go to the example pages of Alpha, want to do to Alpha. So there was some of the things to be categorized and clarified which one are the most probable one, most useful ones.
Right. Well, I mean, there's opening this in the, okay, so one thing would be examples, either opening them in the cloud or downloading them for the desktop. That seems useful.
Right. That's that we're going to do. That's on the list.
Okay. Now, the next thing is being able to do the whole thing using Wolfram Alpha. And potentially there is a string that you could write, which is the Wolfram Alpha input string that corresponds to this form. Is that not correct?
Yeah.
I think that's work.
By the way, there's a bunch of background like seashore noise of something that sounds like a seashore. But okay, but so what would happen? So let's say well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115, 116, 117, 118, 119, 120, I wonder what would happen if we, well, let's see. There's a thing without the actual numbers filled in, and there's a thing with your particular numbers filled in. It might, I mean, which would be a Wolfram Alpha query.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Is that useful? I mean, it's
yeah, we were discussing this yesterday. There are kind of pros and cons, I would think. Alpha typically has a little bit more output from time to time, but generically, while right now we are in sync with Alpha, it's not obvious that we always want to be in sync with all formulas.
I see. Right. Because these are formulas that anybody could submit.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Well, I mean, then maybe what we want to do is for the ones that are Wolfram Alpha, compatible, we should just have a link up here that says, which goes to an example, a Wolfram Alpha example. Is that plausible or not when there is one?
I was just saying that we don't have every single formula represented as an example. Actually, only probably a couple %.
Okay, well, fine. But you can go to the similar query page on Alpha for this formula.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe that's the thing to do. We could
That's definitely the nearest equivalent.
Right. So, I mean, if we went there, we would go Lawrence number, and that would give us
use as a formula.
I never know what this was. Okay.
That was the physical quantity Lorentz number.
Okay. Why is this taking forever? What is going on? Oh, come on. What is it doing? Well, this should get reported to the Wolfram Alpha speed people. I don't know what it's doing here, but maybe the right thing to do would be to have a, if we could get a thumbnail of what this does and just have a sort of Wolfram Alpha flag up on this side with a thumbnail that says Wolfram Alpha version or something. What is this doing? This is great.
It works immediately for me. I just saw it.
Well, I don't know which maybe I'm going to some weird non-production colo. That's really weird. Okay. In any case, be that as it may. Okay, there it is finally. Okay, so what I'm
when you say a thumbnail,
here's what I'm potentially suggesting. Okay. And I may not know what I'm talking about here, but let's just try something like this. So I'm suggesting that we literally make a thing that looks like that and says something like, and we put it over on the right-hand side here, and we say something like, and we write over it or something, compute in Wolfram Alpha.
Yeah.
Compute in Wolfram Alpha.
It would be a static thumbnail independent of the concrete numbers. If you use different numbers.
Absolutely. There are no numbers.
Just make sure.
It's just the one that corresponds to this formula. Yeah. That would be my suggestion.
But also must say, at the site it is right now, it's nearly generic for all formulas. Right. Because typically only at the bottom, if there are custom plots, there will be a different...
Fine.
Certainly the designers could chime in, but I think it would be more useful to just have an alpha logo than the...
No, I don't think so. I think it's useful to see something about what you're going to get.
What's the value of the in situ calculator versus the alpha result, right? I mean, what's the benefit of returning that result in product on this page versus considering going straight to alpha with a submit click?
Because there are many formulas that won't be in alpha.
Yeah.
The idea is that this is a formula repository where one can, submit, individual users can submit formulas, etc. I mean, personally, I think this becomes a lot more useful when the formula isn't just an algebraic formula, when the formula has actual computation in it. But that's, I think, the next step with this. Right. All right. How many formulas do we actually have prepped here?
200.
Okay, and how many formulas do we think
Jason's given me 800 something to do.
Okay, and what's your role in doing them, Bob?
So he has all the metadata, and I'm turning it into resource objects and submitting.
Okay, but is that an automatic process?
Yeah. It is.
Okay.
So the manual part that still sort of should be done smartly is the examples, which I talked to Jason about.
Okay.
And that doesn't have to all happen initially. If we have some, we can go through as the time goes by and make each page better whenever we want,
That's fine. Okay. And what about the submission notebook?
I haven't even started working on that yet. I think the goal for Formula was, we have a decent collection, a good collection already to get that out and live.
But I actually thought Jason had worked on the submission notebook.
Well, I'd proposed a number of fields and did a very rough layout of what it should consist of.
Okay. Well, so do we need to look at that right now?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Back on the resource page, I do have another question. We added, we've just added some routing for the Wolfram Alpha case. I'm wondering about adding some text or a little bit more explanation about what else this resource offers. If someone is landing here just after, searching up a formula, there's a useful form and you can go to Wolfram Alpha, but it doesn't really advertise you can integrate this into the Wolfram language part.
Well, isn't that what the examples are supposed to do?
Those aren't nicely integrated, though. I don't see using this formula for anything. It kind of shows results of, I don't see how you apply this. Right?
I think we discussed yesterday in the meeting. So, if you do it in alpha, we typically give you, not always, a graph or maybe a surface, which has some of the variables changing and shows you where you are in the big picture. Like we could add such a plot making, for instance, here.
Yeah, I don't know what we're achieving with that. The original objective of the formula repository was to allow a large number of fairly random formulas that occur in different specialized fields to have sort of a home page on the web, so to speak. Good. And that's really what we're trying to do here. I think we're dealing with breadth, not, there's no point in repeating what we've already got in alpha, at least so long as alpha is exposed in some way on the web. To my mind, the real interest comes in people submitting formulas or us being able to get people to contribute additional formulas. But again, do we have a framework that allows them to be not just algebraic formulas?
Not yet.
Okay.
One of the things is we don't have, before we have iconize or a friend, a reasonable blobification of some things that solves the differential equation, does a find root and whatever.
And I see what you're saying.
Or at least in conjunction with formula.
Well, if it's in the function repository, we could expect to have something in the function repository that would work. Yeah. Right. Let's move on here. To me, this is looking okay. It's not.
I think what I was hoping to run by you or get some input on was even just adding like a tagline in the header or something in the nav bar for link to a workflow of how to integrate a formula into your Wolfram language code. Some indication that you come to this page and you see a form unless you know what you're looking for. And
that's what the examples are supposed to be for.
If you scroll down to them, yes.
Well, so what are you looking for? What is the right way to integrate this? See, I think these formulas where there's, where the formula itself is a fairly simple form is not an immediate slam dunk useful thing. If this formula had some weird, complicated, differential equation or an interpolating function or something like this in it, then it would be immediately useful to do it in Wolfram language. But when it's in this form, it's like, okay, fine, you can do it there. You have to, substitute values to these variables, but it's kind of trivial because you're doing, it's the reason that, for example, units are not as widely, now that we have units integrated into Wolfram language, they're very useful, but, and people use them even when they don't need to use them. But for many, many years, once you're in the middle of a computation, you don't need units. I think we should just go ahead with what we have here. And, we're going to get more interesting use cases for Wolfram language integration when the formula is more complicated. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay, let's move on because I really want to cover some other things. Updated favicon. What is the favicon? Is that the favicon? That's a really weird favicon considering they mostly don't have integrals in them.
That's our icon for this specific repository, but we need to create something for the web to have kind of like you see the repository icon up in the tabs.
Yes.
So that's.
I'm sorry. What is this icon here? Because this icon doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
That's our current formula repository icon. So
Where did it come from?
I don't know if you've reviewed it or not. I think if it's a matter of switching out symbols, we can, but it didn't get any pushback on these. So,
well, Michael, do you want to comment on this?
I think the omega and the phi is fine. I would probably take off the integral sign.
Yeah, it's because we're not doing integrals here. I mean, otherwise, that's not what it's about. If you can suggest something different, Michael.
Okay.
I mean, maybe some things that are more like, a mass of the earth type, symbol.
I mean, it seems to me like probably the three most iconic formulas of the world are F equal MA, E equal MC squared, and R equal U over I, something that represents these things.
We want just equals?
Yeah, well, equals would be a relevant thing here. Okay, look, let's do another iteration on this. Okay, let's go back. You're talking about this favicon here. Well, it's what we derive from this. Whatever this is, that it should.
Right. He's just saying that's a known issue. That it's
right.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Okay. All right. Let's move on because we really need to move through these things. So let's move on to the neural net repository if we can. Which means if Jason wants to drop, he can do so.
So the link you're going to now is showing all the latest sort of design and style changes, but with only a limited content.
Okay.
All the content is on the actual deployed page.
Okay. Is Megan here, by the way?
Yeah, I'm here.
Right. And the fact that there's gray boxes, that's just because we haven't taken the time to fix them on this deployment.
Okay. Is this kind of ransom note like font treatment really what we wanted?
You would ask for that as far as those delineations of weights for that part of the speech. It'd be better to get away with 2 weights if we can get it down to that.
Okay, I leave it to you.
I wouldn't
change. Go ahead.
Bumping up trained on to be the same as the data set.
I don't know what it's going to look like for other ones. Also, over here, I thought we were going to have the actual, real content as opposed to the superstructure being in a slightly darker or thicker font.
We can do that.
Okay. All right. So what am I supposed to be looking at here? This looks perfectly decent. Are these dingbats what they were intended to be? They're not closable?
We have a branch where we've have the closable implementation, but we don't have design for it yet. We still need to work that out.
Brianna should have done. Yeah, I think we passed a design for the closable ones.
Yeah,
right?
I passed those to now code.
The functionality is going to come in with function repository for sure.
Okay, all right, fine. But this is now getting to be a quite long page. Do we want jump down links at the top? For example, to construction notebook?
Well, that's something once we have the closing tech in place, then we can have one section of examples open and close the rest.
Okay, fine. So then it won't be as long. Okay. Well, this looks okay, except I think that really doesn't look great. Let's take a look at something which has a longer name. Well, that doesn't look as bad, actually. I wish, Jeremy, what can we do to help with this?
Well, how crazy is it to force 2 lines? Because that's why this one looks fine.
Not crazy.
Yeah, we'd have to look at a shorter case, but this, I agree, this looks pretty decent and parses really well.
We're forcing 2 lines on the landing page now.
I see. Well, and trained on could we treat that differently, and could we fake lowercase it? Or is that not a good idea? Also, up at the top, why isn't this clickable? Why isn't this copy-pastable? This title should be copy-pastable as a resource.
We've talked about that, and I disagree. I think it should be something you want to copy and paste like into just a text editor. Because we have the example below where...
I know we have the examples, but I mean, the thing you want to do basically 100% of the time from this page is get the resource data object out or get the net model out.
I copy plain text out of every website I go to all the time. And I think if there's nowhere where this name appears in plain text and is copyable, that's a problem.
Yeah, okay. What do other people think? Megan, do you have an opinion?
I mean, usually I just go down to the net model part and copy it from there.
Well, right, but I mean...
It usually works just as well to copy the title, and then all you have to do is add quotes to it. I don't think it's a big deal, but...
All right, okay. All right, what else do we have to discuss about this? And the only thing that's really being changed that's important for 11.3 is the evaluation function stuff, right? And Megan, I assume you're on top of actual items that need the evaluation function.
Yeah, it's the ones that are named raw model, so it's easy to find them all.
I see. Okay. But and as soon as that goes in, when does 11.3 go on the relevant servers so that we can actually try it here? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Are you asking me? I don't know when.
I'm asking you, but or I'm asking Brad or whoever knows.
That's not something I'm currently tracking for this. I can find out though.
Okay. Okay.
Nothing's running on the servers.
No, but in other words, well, are you saying, okay, maybe all we need to do is get the appropriate fields in the definition notebook with the evaluation function, and then it's up to NetModel, it's up to the client side running of the thing to do the right thing with the evaluation function.
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with 11.3 necessarily. We can update the repository asynchronously.
Well, wait a minute. So you're telling me that as soon as we put in an evaluation function in the repository, how is it going to flow through correctly to NetModel? Who's dealing with that?
So I have the repository set up so that each resource can have versions, and the versions can have independent Wolfram Language dependencies.
Okay.
So for the same resource object, an 11.2 user will get the 11.2 version, the 11.3 user will get the 11.3 version.
That's magnificent. How on earth do you do that?
There's we're storing both on the cloud, and
okay. All right, fine.
And when the client, you have to call from the client, and the client includes their version number in the request.
Yeah, okay, fine. So it negotiates the correct version.
Yeah,
great. Okay, so
if the old version is named raw model and we change the name, then how will the versioning work then?
If they're going to have different names, then they're just going to be different resource objects.
Okay.
But we can. There's no problem having different resource objects.
And we
can leave some off the homepage if we want to.
That's what we want to do. We want to leave the raw model versions off the homepage, but have them, I guess, be available if there's code that depends on them.
Right. And my point of view is if the way that you use it is different, then we should make a new one. If the input to output, if instead of outputting,
I agree.
tensors, it's now outputting probabilities, that means it should be a new object.
That's what's happening here. It's all good.
So
Okay. Anything else we need to discuss about the neural net repository?
The one thing I was curious about was how should we deal with? So a lot of networks that we've got, they're only going to work in 11.3. So what is the sort of protocol for adding those things? Do we just wait until 11.3 comes out and then?
No, I mean, what we're being told is that Bob has a thing that negotiates the version when the client requests the data. So what happens if there is no version for 11.2 and it's an 11.2 client requesting it? What does it do?
Right now, it just gives you a warning that says this is for 11.3, and then it probably fails to import, or I don't know. It will still download it, which maybe it shouldn't.
So I obviously understand the versioning that support was added exactly for this purpose. But the question is about the website. So if all the new models on the website are 11.3 models that no one can run, then...
Don't worry about it. The website is not an announced website.
Okay, fine.
I mean, how about at the point where we get to 12? you know, and this everybody's going to this website. Should we put up things that no one can use, or should we wait until at least one person can use them?
That's a different issue. My feeling is we should not put them in the future. We should not have them on the website. I mean, once the website is announced, we should not have them on the website until people who are, until, for example, the cloud can use them. Am I making sense?
Okay. That makes sense.
Which means basically that there is a version out there in the world. Okay, can we move on to the next item? Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right, function repository. Where are we at with this? So can somebody give me a demo? Go ahead, Brad.
So right now we're at the point where we're working on building content. For the review meetings that we were going to have with you, you'd requested we use the cloud deployed version of Shingles. And so Cody is putting that together currently. Once that's ready, we should be ready to start reviewing content with you.
Okay. Do you have, okay, but all of the mechanisms are now working, is that right? Rick has everything relevant in terms of how the functions are defined, how they're displayed, etc. That's all working, is that correct?
Yeah, so far so good. There's still some minor improvements that could be made, but it is all functional.
And I suspect once we start looking at real content, we'll find things we want to change or update. So there are some loose ends we haven't really trimmed up just yet, knowing that we're going to have to go through that after the content as well.
Oh, Rick, is the gray code one on the? It's not on the public repository, right? It's on the RS test.
No, it's on RS test.
All right, let me send you one more line before you do that, Stephen.
Okay. What is all this about? So this is...
So you know, this deployment that we've been looking at has a bunch of test resources on it. So this is pointing your client to use the test deployment of the resources.
Okay. That's what system servers will eventually do in a more elegant way.
Yep.
Okay, let's see what this does. Okay, so what's that doing? So that was loading the gray code function and then doing this.
It probably downloaded the function resource packlet as well, and then got the resource object.
Do you have another example?
No,
that was kind of goofy. That downloaded something again, so that's obviously wrong. Did you see that?
No, sorry, I was looking for another example.
Okay, take a look. It's downloading. That's wrong.
You're right. That is wrong.
I think the short name, it doesn't cache it, which is something we need to fix. So if you had a space in gray code, I think it would work.
If what?
Gray space code.
There, it would be
there we go.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So then if I look at resource object, are you telling me that there's a resource object called gray code now in the system?
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
Cool.
So the web side of things is, we've got is behind formula and priority. So we're cleaning up a bunch of those things.
We shouldn't do that anymore. We should put function ahead of formula because I think formula looks like it has some extra tentacles in it.
Well, the bottleneck on function is that we don't really have a pipeline of content coming in.
I'm well aware. But I mean, who is working on any content? Is Ben working on content?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, who is
the main approach for content that we took out of our last meeting was that Rick would work on some automated tools to scrape existing packages, the external packages.
Has that started?
I know he's put some work into it. I haven't seen or reviewed any of that yet.
Okay. Do we have a big list of things that are ready to be put into the function repository as soon as the function? In other words, things that need to be recast so that they are appropriate for the function repository.
Yeah, we've been collecting a number of lists for that.
I mean, we go back to Math Source from 1989. I'm sure we've got things from there.
Yeah, I believe that's already on the list.
The function repository from before the web.
So really the next step is to take those places, do some automated cleanup that Rick is going to assist in, and then get them onto some cloud deployed pages. so that we can review them.
But I think it's important. I think once we have this available, people inside the company can start to deploy this, and we also have to have a function repository on the internal private cloud, which I hope is not going to be too difficult. And then people can start to deploy things, both internal functions and external functions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I really think we just need to get this out and ready, even if it does not have a lot of content initially. Okay.
Yeah. My main concern is those things we discover once we start putting real content in there. They're going to, almost always so far have been like metadata changes or extra features we need to implement.
I know. That's why we should start putting content in.
Right. That's currently what we're working on.
Okay. So how is Cody doing? So the design for the shingle pages is finalized, yes?
No. He's working on a generic cloud deployed version of the shingle.
Okay, so where are we at with getting the design for the shingle pages?
No, we designed them. They're just being implemented.
Can I see the design?
Let me try and find that real quick.
Okay.
Unless you have a link on hand, Brianna.
Can I make one suggestion?
Yep.
I think the summary box is quite nice, but that would be nice to have one thing called argument pattern. Like if you have not used it, to give you an idea how many and what things.
Definitely. That would be useful. I mean, we could say, I don't know why it says type function. I guess that's the type of resource. Yeah, okay. So then we could say here, description, find the gray code for an integer, and then arguments, perhaps. There.
Right. It will have the little caret link to the website, which will show you how to use it.
Okay, let's take a look at this.
Oh, what about the template? With little fill-in fields.
Which template?
Well, I mean, we do this for our functions where you can get basically
autocomplete,
the autocomplete template.
User assistance, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But I feel like for somebody who doesn't know this function, going to the web page is a little bit too much work. If you just want to read the code rather than writing the code, so seeing what the thing takes at which slot might be very nice.
Right.
I agree.
I'd be surprised if autocomplete or user assistance, is going to be easy to implement.
Why?
Well, first off, it's
why isn't the user
all the arguments are applied as sub values, and not to resource function itself, and then the patterns would have to be installed dynamically instead of.
That's right. That's fine. There's plenty of stuff that's installed dynamically. Okay, so one project management thing. Somebody should talk to Parth about the user assistance, about getting this implemented for user assistance. Who is PMing the function repository?
Content side is Sushma, functionality is Manu.
Okay, so I think that will be for Manu to go and deal with that. Okay, do we think that this design is final? And I don't understand why that's blue there. Why is that blue there?
We had modeled a lot of this after the resource or the
reference interface.
Yes, reference.
So
sorry.
I think you'd wanted this. You said make it blue because it was clickable and linked to itself, which was consistent with what we do in function pages.
No, but then it should be the whole thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Resource function of that whole thing should be clickable.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I need to see some more examples here. I mean, and also that font is awfully small there. Is it really the same as what we're seeing in a main function page? I don't think so.
It's meant to be. I don't know if it matches, but it's meant to be.
I don't think it's right.
I can go compare the text sizes and update anything that doesn't match exactly.
Fine. I mean, let's go, for example, to I don't know why I'm typing something with such a long name, but okay. So this is what we're supposed to be analogous to. Okay. And I don't know whether are we following over with the blue here and things. And also, this definitely looks smaller there.
Although that's on the right, it's responsive. So if your page is a little narrower, it's going to get a little smaller. It's probably matching that width.
I see. Okay, fine. And this will have the same responsive design, yes?
Yeah. And we decided gray instead of blue because these might be external people's functions. We're kind of, the blue is endorsed by us and the gray is,
fine.
At your own risk.
Okay. And why are we changing this from details and options to details?
I think that's something we should change back to details and options.
Yeah, that should be an ampersand. It would be easier to read. When we have a chance, we should change it.
Will options work on this?
Sure, you can have options, I think.
No, I mean the uppercase options open close.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, and these things here, are those really, is that really the right font inside there? Seems very weird to me.
I think, Jeremy, we were in the process of updating the font we were using for those. Jeremy and Billy have been working on something with that. I think that's Roboto. I can double check in my file, but
the size definitely looks off though.
Yeah, and this looks kind of goofy here. This doesn't feel like the thing that it, somehow that's got to feel like it is the name of a function. It's got this weird decoration here. I don't know what, Jeremy, do you have any thoughts about how to improve that? Because it just doesn't look right here.
The FFX cannot stay because if you have a multi-arc function, that's too confusing.
I'm still sometimes uncertain about the usability of this blob form entirely.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, in this code, if you were typing it out, I assume you would type out resource function of string name instead of copying and pasting a blob into it.
Depends on the person.
Yeah, it depends on the person. I mean, in other words, if you can paste the blob from the example page here, I would just paste the blob, particularly if someplace here, I mean, this is where I just need a place like right here. If I could just click that, well, the question is, what am I going to get if I click each of these things, right? And that's the same issue that I was addressing in the formula repository thing, because I'm asking the question, I would like a place immediately on this page where I can say, great, I want one of those. Boom, I click it, right? Possibly even a visible thing that says copy somewhere so that I know I can just click it to go get that thing and paste it into my notebook. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same issue that we have I've noticed in the neural net repository, I've noticed it occasionally in the data repository, that going and hunting through the examples to find what you want can be kind of annoying.
Well, the first two examples, I mean, if you know how to use the page, the first two examples are sort of consistent across the board.
No, they're not. No, they're not. They're cases where it says random sample of blah, blah, blah as the second example, right? Which is not the right thing. See what I'm saying?
Right, because we don't want to.
Yeah, we don't want to generate a 100 megabyte output or something. Right. But still, it would be useful, and I think we need a design thing where you can just go ahead and get that. So here, for example, if I go, what was I looking at? Let's say this one here, okay? This one, bizarrely, by the way, did I send you mail? I happened to load this one up. It was like 8 gigabytes.
It's big. This one's really big.
Okay.
So what if right next to is open in cloud, download example notebook, it just says copy to copy Wolfram Language input.
I think you have to show a box-like thing that looks like this. Yeah, we could do that. If it was an icon that looked like one of these blobs, if I'm making sense.
Yeah.
Or looked like something like this and just said copy.
Well, in these cases, I think we've got a couple of different things we're achieving. For the data, you'd want to copy resource data of string name for use. For the function, you want the output of resource function of string name. is what you want to copy.
Well, yes, in that case, I agree. But here, okay, let me just address the question, why is this 8 gigabytes? Does it need to be? It's just
I don't think we have Alan or Ben, do we?
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so the issue is we want to be able to copy the resource object and the target. Well, we want to copy you're saying we want to copy 3 things. We want to, in the case of the resource function, we might want to copy the function blob output as well as copying the text version.
It sounds like that's what you want. I think copying resource function of string name serves the purpose.
No, but that's the whole point. If we're going to have that blob form, people need to be able to copy that blob form. Although I admit that blob form is not looking very convincing yet here.
Copying and pasting the blob form is going to look kind of nasty because we can only copy text. So it'd be the import form of the blob.
Well, but when it pastes into the notebook, what's it going to do?
It's going to paste in the input form of the blob.
Why?
Because we can only put text onto the clipboard.
But can't we have box data in that text?
Yeah, we can do like 1D cell.
Yeah, we can. So it will paste just fine.
Right. If you paste it in a text editor, you'll think something terrible happened.
Yeah.
If you paste it in a notebook, it'll be fine.
Right. And who would expect that this would be reasonable in a text editor, given that it has some weird graphical form? Okay, but the other issue is this f of x, as Michael points out, is not going to make it for that.
F of dot?
Better. Or f of...
But f of dot is very obscure mathematics.
What do you mean, obscure mathematics? I mean,
like that's the modern form to represent pure function in abstract mathematics, f of dot.
Okay, but, well, what about f of a gray bar? A, aspect ratio 2-to-1 gray bar, for example. I'm not sure that this is the right iconography. Look, multiple things are wrong here. First of all, keeping this single...
Is it not better to get rid of it totally and somehow more emphasize the function character on the right somehow? I'm not quite sure how without duplicating the opening square bracket.
What if we had an at on the right? Like apply.
It doesn't help us because then somebody won't put the square bracket.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, but look, we really need to get the sort of the full flow of what are these resource function pages done, even if this is what it's looking like right now. We're going to have to change this, but let's not worry about that yet. Let's just get these pages starting to flow through.
Would a wolf icon work here? We tend to go there a lot, but it seems like it might fit here. Okay. So the Wolfram language function. And then matching the font, right? It should just inherit the font
size. What do you want to do to the wolf in here?
Yeah.
It should be the same thing everywhere.
Yeah, I'm not convinced about wolfing this page. I mean, maybe the better thing to do would be to have this dot be some kind of motif that can just be a dot there.
Okay.
Just a plain dot.
Well, I'm thinking that then the dot would have to be carried through here. And so the sort of minimal size icon for the function repository would then be a dot, a circle, a disk. I think we should try that. It's not fantastic, but let's try it because we're still trying to grapple with how do these things work.
But you agree the font size, it should just inherit the surrounding text font, right? The code font.
I would think so, yes.
Yeah, okay.
I would think so. I'm not convinced about that dot thing. Why don't we try it graphically? See what happens.
I'll mock that up, yeah.
I agree, Kenna, the height would be nice to have the surrounding one. But if you use a lot of them in a piece of code with the additional gray boxing around, I don't want to disturb the height spacing of code.
The box should be really tight, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise it will look ugly.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Let's try that. Okay, but the most important thing here is just to start being able to actually deploy these. Okay. And
yeah, that's our first target, is to get those out to use in the review process.
Okay, fine. API repository, and you should have the Packlet repository on here. I have to say that having looked at the formula repository here, it's nice, but I don't think it's going to blow socks off initially. So I feel like in terms of priority, the function and API repositories have much clearer missions, even though both of them have a lack of content right now.
Yeah.
So,
at least we have Jesus, who has a long list of ideas for API.
Well, they shouldn't be difficult to implement, but they actually have to be implemented.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm asking the question: the design of the documentation pages for the API repository. Where are we at with that?
We haven't touched anything in the resource system context. I mean, the last thing we have is from the previous API project.
Well, we need to get that out of mothballs and start working on it. And I would say that if we have to throttle back a bit on the formula repository, we should do that. But we should keep pushing forward on the functions and APIs. And I mean, the next one that's clearly going to be important is there's several more that are important. And we got to figure out how to speed up these repositories because, I know each one of these has had its own weird tentacles and so on.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping
it's going to be the same for the API repository.
No, I know that one has
things we have to figure out for that as well.
Package would be nice to bundle with function repository.
Well, or Packlet repository is what we're really talking about there, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the first step is to get the Packlet system so that we can, is to make a documentable version of the Packlet system, which I don't think should be so hard. Where are we at with that? Which is just pure language documentable. Forget about shingling and things like this.
Right. I think Todd had that on his agenda 14 years ago.
Great.
The Packlet manager tools have been in the language and great and working for a long time, but we've never really had documentation for them. Are you talking about doing that or having a layer above it with documentation?
I'm not sure. I don't know whether that layer is usable. I think one of the issues is right now it's pure public Packlets, which is also what we're doing with the function repository right now until we have the marketplace set up.
Right. I think getting Packlets to kind of be a first-class object in the language would be the first step before we start moving towards packaging it as resources.
Well, fair enough. So if you want, get a design meeting together about that subject.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I think I need to run here. Okay. Anything else we need to cover right now?
No, I think that's good.
Okay. See you guys soon.
Thank you.
Bye.